Sonic Boom episode 79, Fleeing from Trouble. We started out with Eggman yelling at a salesman for jacking up the price of some chocolate he likes. So he threatens him with the laser blast from his Eggmobile, but of course he doesn't actually do it. Even shooting him with the laser would be too awesome for this Eggman, so he simply stops at stealing the chocolate. I'm sure AOSDH Robotnik would have shot him just fine, and it would just be some harmless slapstick. Also, Sonic magically shows up to stop him right away, because he's always there by sheer coincidence, and he sends a giant robot at him, which does nothing but stand still and make noise. All this time, I'm expected to— oh, good, thank God. Eggman did finish the chocolate bar. It would have been really stupid if he hadn't. So it didn't matter that Sonic got a boost from Knuckles and destroyed it. And yet, Eggman complains anyways, even though he technically won. But his problem is he didn't destroy Sonic. He still got to steal something though. He complains that he keeps building larger and larger robots to no avail. I'm still waiting for an explanation for why his giant robot was immobile, by the way. Instead, he just says it was worthless. And somehow calls Orbot and Cubot the most worthless of all, when if anything they're the most competent. Name one time they failed that mattered. Then he plans to use flea bots, which involve micro-nanotechnology. It's impressively smart of him to think, well, the large robots don't work, so maybe I should build a small one. Now actually, that's especially smart because if it's small, it's that much harder for Sonic to accurately attack it. Why doesn't he make all of his robots really small? Have them capable of injecting people with poison? He would win effortlessly. He can control a whole bunch of them using a button. Good, they didn't backfire on Eggman, which was the obvious joke. Cubot shows up in Mad Burger for the plan, being really obvious about how suspicious he's being right in front of Sonic, and somehow he doesn't. And he confuses me because, again, he says that they don't eat food, when we clearly learned that he ate all the rations in Eggman's bunker. And he said that he hoped he didn't have a huge meal one time. Seriously, they're talking right in front of Sonic, making it very obvious that they have no actual reason to be there, and he does nothing. So, this makes it very forced that they're gonna do anything to him successfully. So Orbot and Cubot infect all of the heroes with flea bots to make them itchy one after the other. We could have saved a lot of time if we were just shown them infecting all the heroes at once. Like we could have a split screen where we see all of them at once. And Eggman laughs just to cough up some of his cake. It's interesting that all of the heroes are forcing themselves to smile and hide their fleas from each other, with Amy saying that there's no shameful hygiene problem here. Their friendship really does suck if they have such bad communication that they won't immediately tell each other their problem. I didn't expect them to try to hide it. I thought they'd immediately tell each other so that they could get some help. I admire that Stick just immediately says, "You guys got fleas too, huh?" Sonic says his house is spotless. Wait, I thought he was a slob! That episode sucks even more then! He blames Amy's rug, and Knuckles blames himself. That's insecure of him. He also acts offended that he besmirched his own good name. He's really trying too hard to be funny. He was just looking for an excuse to insult himself, apparently. Then when the heroes want to get some flea spray, making me wonder why Sonic waited until now to do it. I'm expected to believe that the mayor is gonna quarantine them in a house. Sonic even said that this was the only store that sold flea spray, making it very counterproductive that they would do this to the only customers who would ever buy flea spray. Like, this is the only store they can get it from, somehow. And yet he wouldn't just bring it out to them and leave it there. Knuckles hates having to use the spray after Tails says there's tons of side effects like nausea and heartburn and dizziness. And Amy has to wear a flea collar first. And she's reluctant to do it, even though the only people who will see her in it are her friends. But then Mike the Nerd gets his revenge because he shows off the heroes and their situation to a bunch of people who should respect them a lot more than this. So because Eggman started to steal chocolates, the mayor unquarantines them. I love that Knuckles lampshades that he and the cops should be doing something about Eggman instead, but somehow their only response is that that's enough lip coming from him. Tails at least explains that he was so busy itching that he never thought he was itching because of flea bots. So the heroes actually start fighting each other to hurt the bots, which you'd think would be considered the terrible idea immediately, because obviously they're just gonna miss most of the flea bots. This includes Knuckles getting a punch by Sonic, and Amy hurting Tails' foot. Sadly, the show's animators lazy out and show us a dust cloud out of nowhere to cover up all the heroes is fighting with each other. What were they thinking? Any animator that does that should be fired. This is an action series. Isn't fighting the whole point? For fuck's sake, I was looking forward to more of this. Instead, Sonic miraculously gets the idea that there's a controller for the Fleabots and breaks in Eggman's base. He sure is lucky that he assumed that instead of assuming the Fleabots were autonomous and just like moving by themselves, just like, you know, all the robots. Like Hispanics don't need a button. They need a button to home in on Eggman's location, but not a button to decide to fight the heroes. He sure is lucky he was able to get all the way to his base instead of itching the whole time and staying still. When I first saw them itching, I thought about how this was a very dangerous plan of Eggman's because, logically, it'd be impossible for them to fight Eggman this way. You can't make a good action scene when the characters are itching, and yet they miraculously won't sustain a single injury the whole time. What the fuck are the robots doing? Standing still? I guess the glitch that made his biggest robot do nothing affected them too. You'd think the fleas would increase attention, but I forgot what show this is. I was expecting Eggman to send a whole bunch of robots to fight them before this point. Why did they have to go to Eggman's base to start a fight? It was obvious from the start that they would be more vulnerable to his attacks. And yet they have to go to the fight? Knuckles spinning around the floor from itchiness even then manages to knock away the robots. And more importantly, Sonic's itchiness causes them to spin out all over the place to hit all the walls, which eventually causes them to hit away the remote when Eggman's all intimidated. So predictably, Eggman gets the fleas, and Amy destroys the remote. I'm not sure the fleas can infest a human with barely any hair at all. Sure, they're robots, but that's not the point. It's not like they stay in his mustache, he itches all over, and we can't see them. I don't think he would have programmed his Fleabots to be able to turn against him, regardless of whether anyone pressed the button. If this is the case, he was indeed very lucky that he didn't have to deal with this the minute they were activated in his base, because I was anticipating it there. If they would target anybody, he was an obvious target. When the episode started and Eggman's giant robot did nothing, I immediately assumed that the episode would end up telling me why. That it would be a subplot where his robots were glitching out, and he would fix the problem. But instead, the episode's about Eggman infesting the heroes with robot fleas. Considering that the heroes are Mobians with fur, it's odd that it took this long in the franchise for Eggman to think of this. Well, judging by the action scene, we get our answer. Somehow the action scene where the heroes were fighting each other was the best one of the episode, in spite of that god-awful dust cloud. Because when they're in Eggman's base, all they do is itch, and his robots do nothing to hurt them. It would have been justified if Eggman revealed that they were affected by a glitch. Then if he had Chekhov's gun from the start of the episode. Even if it's still lame that in what should be a tense situation, they still don't take advantage of their vulnerability. It did make sense that the heroes were quarantined by the mayor. He's just trying to protect the rest of the village, even if it looks like he's turning on them again. Sonic does lampshade that they turned on them for less, which is kind of cathartic. But it was still unacceptable that anyone agreed to go on Mike's tour and gawk through the window, when logically, not only should he be in prison for kidnapping and assault, but that window should have the curtains covering it at this point. These are heroes, they wouldn't be treated like this. I was at least a little impressed with the show when the heroes were told that Eggman's done a number on the town without the heroes there to stop him. But of course, we don't get shown exactly what that means, like I expected in the very next scene. I guess somehow all he did was steal chocolate bars. When it was a miracle he was even paying for them in the first place, actually. Wasn't his whole goal to take over the world? You'd think that he'd just try to seize power over the town by usurping the mayor. Actually take advantage of the fact that the heroes are incapacitated. He missed the perfect opportunity! But that's why this plot doesn't work. The Fleabots are too overpowered of a device, so the plot has to fall apart in logic to justify the heroes winning. He doesn't even try it again and hide the remote? Actually, why does he even need to keep it where the heroes can get to it? Why doesn't he just hide it in a locked drawer? Why doesn't he just press the button once and then hide the remote on the moon? And connect it to a power source to recharge it forever. By keeping it in a base they constantly break into, he should have known it could only be used for so long. While it makes sense that they figure out the fleas were robots because nothing worked against them, there's no way they would have made it all the way to Eggman's base if they're constantly itching. In fact, how did any of them even make it to Medburger? How did they have the motivation to go to Medburger? And of course, they don't die to the robots in all the time they waste being itchy and vulnerable. It would have made sense if the robots didn't have a chance to do anything, because Sonic spin dashed all wildly right away. And they should have just done that and gotten it over with. He had no reason not to do that right away. But this does present a good argument for why this device isn't as overpowered as Eggman thought it being, at least merely against Sonic, as he can spin dash around whether it's itchy or not. But the rest of his friends would have logically been screwed. Also, the flea idea reminded me of a rejected, sarcastic idea in the Archie Sonic Comics off-panel story, where Mammoth Mogul would join a flea circus. It was presented as an intentionally bad idea to make fun of the villain for coming up with it. Long story short, this episode was boring and disappointing. The heroes doing nothing but itch, just a whole lot of nothing happening. The heroes fighting each other would have made up for everything, since I have legitimate beefs with all of these characters in this show. But they didn't even do that right. Episode 80, Lightning Bowler Society. It would suck if this was exactly what it sounded like, because these villains have had their true potential wasted enough. Let's just get this over with. Only in Sonic Boom would this happen. The show even mocks me because it starts out with them saying this will be the most dastardly scheme yet, and they catapult fruitcakes at the heroes. Although that's genuinely intimidating as dramatic music plays, and the fruitcakes make a hard landing like they're dangerous. It would be nice if they would hit at least one of the heroes though. Somehow, the heroes casually have a tea party while the fruitcakes never hit them, which is really reckless. Really? They wouldn't have gotten hit? And Amy casually hits the ground with a hammer to send them away with the shock wave. And I'm expected to believe they've lost over 80 times. So they decide to give up villainy because they arbitrarily suck at it. So they start bullying and are happy that they won against Lady Walrus. But out of nowhere, it turns out Sonic and his friends have always been bullers too. So they show up here for no reason, just so they can upstage these guys. Why were they even here? These guys really got made the underdogs, because I'm pissed at this. At least it makes sense that Sticks suck, because she's too rebellious and just throws it and runs at the pins. Still, while the bad guys do a good job bullying, it's impossible to believe there was a bowling alley outside. I'm surprised they actually beat Sonic in the game. And because they're going to be busy, with Dave having to shave his mom's back, they agree to challenge Sonic to a rematch a week from now. I guess the only reason they were even considering challenging Sonic to anything was because they were that desperate to beat Sonic at anything. But I was just thinking they should take off from Sonic immediately so he won't ruin their new hobby. Which he probably will. It was weird that Percy said she was the biggest fan of the guy in the tree. And the guy was even called the cute one by an announcer, and was somehow popular with the girls when most of him is hidden by a tree. I don't buy this. She's also given a dinner with him. And she seems to be manipulating him actually, as she says out of nowhere that he's being buttered up and his teammates are holding him back. Where could she have possibly gotten this idea when she's not even talked to his teammates? I was just thinking that she was actually being implied to be kinda into villains, like Fiona, but now I'm wondering if she's actually trying to ruin their team. Because after Sonic freaks out because he really doesn't want to lose to them something, Percy makes sure the entire team starts bickering because of their egos. So the tree guy thinks they're all jealous of him, so they start pushing each other. I guess it kinda makes sense that this was so easy because they're bad guys, and therefore immature selfish jerks. But it's not fair! They just found a bowling hobby! And why is the tree guy called the chameleon anyways? He doesn't look like one, because we never see him outside the tree, so that's a bad name. Sonic's mad that they've all split up because he wants to humiliate all of them at once at bullying. He's a petty jerk. Like he's a bully who's addicted to winning and won't just pick on someone his own size. And Percy's still with them for some reason. She's really that desperate because Sonic won't date her? It came off like the writer had no idea what to do with her. Then after the Walrus wastes our time with a bad infomercial he could somehow be allowed to make, and Dave also wastes our time with his painful voice, we see the Weasel Bandits fight with each other on Comedy Chimp's show over who gets top billing. Then one of the Weasels gets met by Knuckles at night. Then it goes to the tree guy who started missing his friends out of nowhere, even though they took any excuse to hate each other before. And plus they're prankster bad guys, so you think they wouldn't be able to feel emotional attachment. They think they're doing fine, and then Eggman shows up, and sends his Megabot to shoot lasers at the village. Amy and Sonic finally lampshade that he's being unoriginal, and Eggman at least explains that building new robots is expensive. Well, one, I'm sure he has way more money than he knows what to do with. since he's always able to make robots and has this giant base. And 2, I'm sure rebuilding robots is expensive too. The heroes don't seem to be doing any damage to the robots. Out of complete nowhere, for no reason at all, Chameleon Guy decides to become a villain team again for no reason. And the writer finally reminds us who Percy actually is because she's upset with him. She's like, "What are you doing?" She even sounds horrified. So a bowling ball gets sent near Amy, and she whacks it over to the robot to defeat it in one hit. Is that all that happened? I literally rewinded the video twice because I thought I missed something. So how is that an act of villainy? If anything, they were heroes. And yet this inspired them to be bad guys? The walrus says that being bowlers hurt their friendship, so it wasn't worth the fame and money. And just like that, the underwhelming waste of time of an episode finally ends. About time. Why couldn't they have learned their lesson from Robots in the Sky? There was basically no action at all here, so there was no payoff. Megabot got beaten in one hit with a bowling ball, even though the heroes weren't even denting it, so it seemed invincible at first. It seemed like all the plot progressions were too easy. Well, it made sense that the Lightning Bolt Society would at least take a break from villainy because they keep getting bested by Sonic. But logically, it made more sense if they just moved to another town altogether where Sonic couldn't do anything to them. Then they'd be way more successful because Sonic wouldn't even know what they're doing. But why would any town allow them to move there? They're criminals who don't even bother to hide their identities with masks. That just brings up a huge plot hole. I can understand why Eggman isn't prosecuted because he has machines to back him up, but these guys are all considered jokes. They could be kept in prison no problem. The walrus guy was even in prison, and I don't even know how he broke out, but you'd think the cops would have just put him back in. They don't have any robots, they're just harmless pranksters. Anyways, I was surprised and proud of them for beating Sonic at bowling. And it was interesting to see Sonic's ego really bruised as he was desperate to beat them at bowling next time. Like, it's about time he knows how it feels to lose. He'd never be able to handle being in Eggman's place. But then the plot was padded out with this tedious cliche plot where the team breaks up over their egos. All thanks to Percy, who idealistically started dating one of them based on the look of his face. I loved that she got mad at them for deciding to be villains again. It was character derailment at the last minute, reminding us that she's not supposed to be dating him for being a villain. I never got the idea that she was only dating him because he wasn't being a villain, because nobody had any reason to forgive these guys and stop thinking them as bad guys just because they were bowling. So why did she? It was tedious seeing how they acted, and that was all the writer cared to do to pad out the episode, because why lengthen it with an engaging and interesting action scene when you can make the show boring instead? The only evil plan they had was at the start of the episode, where they catapulted fruitcakes at the heroes, which was at least creative looking, but what's the point? I don't see why they want to bother the only people standing in the way of Eggman taking over the town. That'll make things worse for everybody. And since when is it that fighting Sonic is the only thing they care about, to the point where they give up on villainy because they keep losing to Sonic? If anything, fighting Sonic is rare for them, isn't it? We saw at the start of the Evil Orbot episode that villainy was on the rise, and the Lightning Bolt Society was being successful, and not once did the heroes stop them. It's Eggman they're always conveniently right there to stop. Wouldn't it make more sense if they always pranked Eggman instead? He's the bad guy making their town live in fear. I guess they're too scared of a guy whose robots all die in one hit, even to something like a flower shooting water, or a burger. Sonic keeps calling Eggman the one whose plans have no motive, but these guys just do pointless stuff out of sadism. So what if they accomplish their goal and beat Sonic? Congratulations! Now there's nobody in the way of Eggman taking over the town. Now he's gonna tear down some homes and shut down the media, like last time. So you think these guys would have learned to appreciate the heroes by this point? It's not like they're still working directly for Eggman, like they should have continued to do after the Shadow episode because it was working perfectly there. They weren't told they'd have anything to gain in letting Eggman win, like positions of power over the town. These guys would work as sub-bosses.